We're so excited to start this conversation. Hello, my name is Gloria Gonzalez-Morales. I am the director of the Center for Academic and Faculty Excellence. And it is my pleasure to invite you to this conversation with Dr. Bob Klitgaard. He has been trailblazing here at CGU in terms of thinking about AI. How do we use AI? How do we teach with AI? And more importantly, how do we think about AI in our graduate education context? A couple of weeks ago, he sent me the syllabus and a notebook LM for his course for this semester about policy and AI, and he can explain to you a little bit more about it. And I got excited about it. I was asking the notebook LM things like, what about universal basic income? How do we figure this out if there's going to be abundance, as some of the gurus say. And I was very impressed with what was coming up with. So we had a chat with Bob last semester, and a lot of people came, and people were getting really excited, and we just decided to have a chat again. And instead of doing it only Bob and I, and just to invite everybody else and also chime in. We're very happy to listen to your comments as well as we go through. So put your questions in the chat, or even you can raise your hand using the Zoom option, and you can talk as well. So Bob, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about what is your course this semester? Like a little bit of like an intro on that one. And I'm just changing our script a little bit.
Okay. Well, we have a classic course here called Policy Design and Implementation, which tries to teach students about how to rethink the goals of public policy, to expand the alternatives, to think about what works, where and when, and how to implement things, to look at market and non-market institutions, public-private partnerships, and other things. Of course, depends on who teaches it, but there are classic skills of policy analysis. And what I'm trying to do now is try to say if the AI revolution or creates new realities, what will it do to policy analysis in two ways? One, how will the answers change to our past results about the effect of certain policies in a new world? And secondly, can we consider the policy problems, positive and negative policy challenges of the AI revolution itself? So we're trying to do that in the course, as well as teach the students how to use the tools of AI, particularly ChatGPT, Notebook LM, but could be any large language model to help them address those questions.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Yeah, I myself, I'm working with, and I call them La Chatty is ChatGPT.
Chatty.
Claudia is Claude AI. Gemini is Gemma. And I haven't given a name to Notebook LM. So, I actually like, I'm open for suggestions for that one. But I actually work with all of them. And I have been working on my organizational development and change class with my students in Divos. I have some of them here. And I really want my students to understand how to use AI for helping organizations and institutions move on with their development and change needs. Because actually AI as a revolution is going to be actually a real change factor in our organizations. So based on that, I want to like open up the scope a little bit and think about what do you think that we should do in terms of graduate programs at CGU to prepare students to lead, research, and practice in a world where AI may generate abundance, but also uphill, new risks, and new questions about well-being and human purpose?
It's a big agenda, isn't it? All those things, all of our disciplines have a role there. From if you talk about well-being and human purpose, that includes our School of Religion or departments of religion, philosophy, and so forth. Did you see the Atlantic just came out today for next month, and it has an article called "America Isn't Ready for What AI Will Do to Jobs." And it goes and talks to a lot of authors, from economists to activists. And the subtitle is, "Does anyone have a plan for what happens next?" And the answer, according to the author, Josh Tarangil, is no. We just do not have an answer. One economist who's working on this in, of all places, Hungary, written some important things, says only about 10 economists around the world are working on the policy implications. One of them, Chad Jones, wrote a piece that's coming out in the Journal of Economic Perspectives that we're reading in the course. And he's basically saying, we don't know what's going to happen. And I think fair enough. And what we do in policy analysis when we have a situation where we don't know what's going to happen, or in business, is we use scenarios. So, for example, Royal Dutch Shell pioneered scenario planning 4 decades ago, where they had the boards of directors and the top leadership look at two scenarios for the industry and then try to analyze what policies might be robust across those scenarios and what way stations might be there so they could see if change is coming quickly. Same thing goes, of course, in national security policy, where scenarios are widely used. So we begin the course with looking at scenarios of what could happen in the next 3 to 5 years, understanding that nobody likes science fiction, at least I don't, and we're not making predictions. We're trying to use these to help us extend our minds. And then we have three that we require, and there's a dozen more on the optional reading list in case you get very interested. And perhaps I'll put up on the chat here the syllabus to the course, or you can, Gloria, so people can have that as a souvenir if they'd like. And then we move from there to the question of what is it for you to use large language models and AI to get yourself accustomed to the idea of co-intelligence. So we look at examples from the past year of where co-intelligence, meaning humans and AI working together, are already having transformative effects in public schools, mental health counseling, cybersecurity, management consulting firms, anti-corruption efforts, and a total of 13 different areas. And the students use deep research from any of the sources, could be ChatGPT, to investigate what that looks like in their field. We develop the prompts using ChatGPT, and they develop an overview of their own field, which could be rural urban migration in the Himalayas in one student's case, or public school reform in another student's case. So we get started at the idea that you're working with these tools to understand what's going on and also to stimulate yourself to think more creatively about what's going on. And then we move into the question of goals. I think radical policy analysis, in the best sense of radical, questions the goals that are there. It's not just cost effectiveness, for example. It does matter, but it's not just that. So three archetypal goals that are sometimes undervalued or underappreciated come front and center with this revolution. First, taking care of the environment. Second, equality, equity, and social justice. And third, human flourishing and well-being. Not only the absence of scarcity, that of course, but human well-being. So we teach those with real examples. For example, in the case of the environmental thing, we look at studies of global warming, classic policy analyses and ideas about policy analysis there. But also then we look at the case of Gen AI and what it could do to energy use and how sustainable this could be. And are there ways that it could also expand energy supply, for example, and so forth. And we move through the other objectives of equality and equity, noting that we read some of the classic Elizabeth Anderson's paper, What's the Point of Equality, is a marvelous mind bender for people, and try to think then about what could happen in this abundant time, which also has upheavals, but it's run by white and Asian men in huge American and Chinese companies, basically a few European companies. Who's left out of that? When abundance comes, who will get that? How do we think about that set of goals and objectives at the same time that we value innovation, creativity, and growth? And so we move from there to the question of purpose, and this gets to your last point of your question asks, what can universities do, not just a public policy thing?
Mhm.
If we talk about purpose, it's interesting to me, Gloria, that this last week, actually since February 5th, when Anthropic's 4.6 came out, and then immediately after that, OpenAI's 5.3 Codex came out, Codex Pro, and immediately users were astonished and discouraged. I was struck by the remarks of one guy from Anthropic. Let's see if I can find his name here. Aditya Agarwal, former CTO of Dropbox, wrote that a weekend spending coding with Anthropic's Claude left him, quote, filled with wonder and also a profound sadness. Why sadness? He said, we're never going to write code again by hand. We don't have to. He said, coding was something I was very good at, but it's now free and abundant, leaving me happy but disoriented, sad, and confused. And Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, had a similar experience with his own tool. By the way, Claude 4.6 was largely written by Claude. In other words, the update was written by the AI itself, which is unprecedented. Well, so Altman uses Codex over the weekend. Says, "Man, it was such a cool toy. I was really happy, but soon I felt a little useless, and it was sad. I'm sure we'll figure out much better and more interesting ways to spend our time, but I'm feeling already nostalgic for the present." I mentioned Chad Jones, the Stanford economist, in this paper he wrote for the Journal of Economic Perspectives, and he speculates himself. He says ChatGPT 5.2, ChatGPT 5.2 is already better than I am at doing a lot of the work in his economic growth theories. It's better. And he says, maybe I can imagine in the future, as it gets really better, that myself and my fellow economists interested in growth will go to some beautiful place and be instructed by AI in the field we care about. So this question of what is human purpose comes front and center. And the students are going to read in a remarkable book by the Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom called Deep Utopia, where he investigates public policy or policy and life in a solved world, inshallah. But it also raises questions of what are we doing here?
Yeah. I actually am also looking for an interesting paper that came out too in Nature, and that is based on thinking about general AI and if AI has reached that idea of general AI.
Right.
And it's a very good, well written paper because it talks about like it depends on how you define general AI. We actually have reached it. We kind of think that general AI isn't going to be that impressive intelligence that does everything because a human doesn't have that impressive intelligence that does everything. So if you think about specific general AIs for specific things, we have reached that. And general AI is what it was laid out by Alan Turing in the 50s as a human level intelligence that cannot be distinguished, like that you do something and you're like, is this a human or not? And we already are experiencing that. And as Boba was saying, like people saying like, yeah, it actually it reasons better than we do. And that is for me a very exciting and I think, yes, at the same time, sad realization in terms of like, okay, so we're in a graduate university where we're supporting the scholars to learn more and to try to figure out the responses to very important questions for humanity. And that I feel that that's if we keep that as a goal, maybe we can find ways of using AI and having still a purpose as a graduate school. But like I'm really like trying to grasp that. Um, moving on, in your course this semester, you describe it as a bold but humble step in taking the AI revolution seriously from a policy perspective. But what does that mean in practice? What are you trying to help the students see that they might otherwise miss?
I think one obvious question, if we have a lot of abundance and a lot of upheaval, is should we have a universal basic income or something like that, a
Mhm.
robot tax or some sort of shared wealth program? In the past, I've taught about universal basic income in almost every iteration of this course, and it turns out in the past it's been infeasible. The best paper written in 2024 on this um, concluded that the labor supply effects would be so large that even a $25,000 a year universal basic income would not be feasible in the United States. But I think if you look out 3 or 4 or 5 years and you say we could have much more abundance, then a UBI could be feasible. And moreover, if we have a lot of upheaval, it might be necessary. Now, notice who's the upheaval about, by the way. In past iterations of automation, we worry about dock workers and robots that can do work in putting packages up on the wall or whatever it might be. This time it's going to be senior partners of law firms. It's going to be chief accountants. It's going to be many high-level executives in technical functions. And you know, of the 900 most endangered jobs, according to one study last year, among the top 20 is professor. So it's not just going to be folks out in the street who are affected by this. It's going to be people like us that are going to be affected by this. And what that means is when we're affected, there's a lot more voice coming out for do something about this than if working class people would be out in the street. And that means that I think there will be political pressure to have UBI, but also the abundance to enable UBI. And we should start thinking now about how could that happen, put some scenarios out there. And importantly, when I say think about it, I don't just mean you and I think about it. My strategy for doing a lot of public policy analysis about big issues is a convening where you get people together from the affected and empowered communities to look at the data together, to bring their data, to look at examples of things that are like this problem that might have worked in some other sense, to look at some framework for policy analysis, and then to together try to envision practical steps they could take. In my experience, that kind of process produces creative thinking that wouldn't happen if I sat down and tried to write a paper about it, or even got a transdisciplinary team together here at CGU to do it. So when I say we have to think about it, yes, we do. We have to think about it, get our students to think about it. And I also think it's time for us to think, are there some areas of special interest to our university where we could try to convene people to get together? Now, one of those could be the future of graduate education. Graduate education in a scenario in something that we talked about last fall, Gloria, we had two scenarios. One is many universities are out of business in 2030 because the credential doesn't matter, because students can learn this stuff from AI better than they can learn it in most university classes, because professors get discouraged and maybe they're too expensive, so they're substitute cheaper factors of production. But there's also a scenario, and they're of great flourishing for universities, where we use the same technology that can facilitate fake learning and use that technology to facilitate true profound learning. And that's the task for us as teachers, to motivate and then to help the students use these tools to advance the field and advance application. I was struck by something that Tyler Cowen said. Tyler is a economist who has The Marginal Revolution, is now a columnist for Free Press, and is widely recognized as a guy who sort of tells it like it is. He wrote something last summer, which our students read, called Will This Change the Meaning of a Human Life? And he writes about himself. He says, you know, ChatGPT is already a better tutor in economics than I am. But he can answer questions better than I can, but I can ask questions better than it can. And then he added, for now. So I think we're going to have to figure out, how do we think of our role as professors, and what could we be a place with our transdisciplinary focus, with our small and intimate size, with our transitions that are going on right now, where we could convene people from IT companies, some of our colleagues in the real world, our students, and think through some of these possibilities together.
Yeah, and also there's something that I just thought about that I haven't made the connection for myself until you just said it, that if the credentials don't have any value anymore, I'm thinking about, because right now there's a lot of people very worried about academic integrity. One of the things that I think about it is when I'm designing my courses, I'm applying ungrading as much as I can, because I don't want people to be doing things just for a grade, but for the intrinsic motivation of I'm learning. So the more I ungrade, I'm assuming that the more they will be using these tools in a way that support their learning and support their ability to solve a problem rather than ability to get an A plus. So then I am thinking like there's going to have to be not only a change in terms of like how we think about it as professors and scholars and the university in itself, but accreditation bodies, right? Like for example, we're based on how WASC decides that we can be accredited or not. That requires different things in terms of what are the core courses, how are they evaluated, what are our evaluation products, how we can show all this. I feel like this means that not only like a specific institution needs to change as we join the AI revolution, but this is a true system level revolutionary change that needs to happen to support all that, right? Like, because if we're changing and WASC is not changing, but accreditation doesn't matter or credentials doesn't matter, like, there's a lot of moving pieces here that I would love and that people start thinking about because I think
Yes.
that is really exciting.
Yeah. Well, I see some of the folks here, Bobby Garcia, let's see, Arun. I see some other students, so Deborah, some folks who have worked on this. And we've tried to think about what could be some of the scenarios for graduate education and how could we make sure that we use the AI to serve our highest values and our intrinsic values. In fact, how do we use the AI to enhance our intrinsic values of what we come to do, our calling to do this in the first place? I was struck by Mina Sarkar, one of the students we had last summer, who's a music theorist, who said that using the AI in this course for learning and research helped rekindle her passion for music itself. Now that really, wow, that really amazes me. So if we can use this to rekindle the reason why you want to study philosophy, or the reason why you're doing history, or the reason why you're doing public policy, whatever it is, that's amen. Let's do that. So let's figure out how we as professors can do that using the AI to help.
Yeah. And also you were talking about how like things like universal basic income. I have been hearing in some of these podcasts that I'm listening to all the time, and then I get scared, and then I get excited and scared and excited about the idea of universal basic services instead of thinking about universal basic income. So schools here at CGU, like the School of Global Health and Community, would have a lot to say about these issues along with triple SPE, right? Um, it is not just about income, like and it's a lot about policy and politics. So how would you, I'm going back out of a script, Bob. How would you
Okay.
sell your course to anybody who's not just people who are in policy or in like in the school of in DPE?
Yeah.
How would you invite students or scholars from other schools to come to a course?
Well,
Like,
that's great. You know what? I'm gonna do what I love to do with people like Zach Swanson and Bobby Garcia and Alicia DeVore. So Zach, you're in psychology, and Bobby, you're in business, right? But you have law degrees and a host of other degrees. How do you think this AI co-intelligence stuff we could sell that to business students?
Well, for me, I would say that it increases your productivity by a tremendous amount, and that the idea of also, if you don't embrace this technology, you're going to get run over by it. So if you don't want to go extinct, you best get on board. Um, that may sound kind of alarmist, but I think it's the truth. Every day, the more I get involved with AI and learning new things about it, the more amazed I am, and not always in a good way.
How about you, Zach?
Feel like it's almost impossible nowadays for a business student not to be aware of kind of like the impending value of AI. I think it's like maybe it's just social media, but it's just everyone feels like if you're not going to learn the skill, you're going to be left behind. And I feel like people who are pursuing graduate degrees in business probably already adopt some of these things. But what's really important is the pathways to learning about artificial intelligence literacy. And you've done a lot of work there, and this is what this is too. But that's a way that CGU can definitely support growth in all of the different schools, especially the business school, is like giving us
Yeah.
the resources of how do we learn in intentional ways and in ethical ways.
But you're doing positive psychology, Zach. How about for your area?
I feel like it's kind of like one of those things that individuals are picking up by themselves, and it's not something that's intentionally been
Yeah.
built in. I hear everyone's using it probably for simple reasons like email, coming up with ideas, revising, like drafting and learning new things. But I think the way that it needs to grow is to be integrated in like a way that's maybe a little bit more intentional on the beginning of the education, but in a graduate school, we're not at the beginning of our education. So I wonder kind of how it can evolve at the graduate level.
Yeah. Gloria, I see Roland's got his hand up.
Yeah, Roland, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm for the first time here. I'm not with DBOS. I'm actually with the Drucker School of Management, and I run there a center called Center for the Future of Organization. And I was just intrigued by the question, of course, what does it mean for business, right? And it's, we can discuss obviously AI about knowledge and knowing things, doing things more efficient and things like that. But we are currently doing a bigger research project together with Microsoft on implementing agentic AI in large-scale organizations and co-creating that actually with hyperscalers and what it means. And we're looking at that from so many angles. So one thing is just productivity, efficiency, and things like that. But it's really going to transform the architecture, the overall texture of what an organization is. For instance, it's a silo buster, right? There are no tribal the psychologists here in the session, right? There are no tribal silo, affiliations anymore because AI doesn't have any of these emotional elements that stick to, I don't know, I'm HR, I'm IT, I'm strategy or whatnot. The other thing is it totally boosts ecosystem engagement as, the whole supply chain and customer centricity and stuff like that through big data that become possible to deal in a different way change. So I guess what I want to say is it's much more than the skills thing, the productivity thing, the efficiency thing, that AI has. It's really more and more importantly about the whole operating model of what organization means these days, right? And so what governance is a very important element of the whole thing, especially as companies really don't know how to deal with that new kind of guide rails that they need. So I think, we have, unfortunately, and I'm guilty as anybody, I guess, not being, I once met I once met Donald way, way back when I did some other work, but otherwise I've been away from DBOS, which is a shame because you guys do, in many ways, more in leadership and organization as the Drucker School does in a traditional MBA. So I think it's also a call for us to look at these inputs that you, for instance, Bob, can give, really make them pervasive across the entire university.
Thank you, Roland. Just wanted to highlight that I am a DBOS professor, but here we're trying to to reach everybody. The Center for Academic and Faculty Excellence is a CGU unit, and I'm actually like really interested in understanding how we can leverage our transdisciplinarity identity in order to support CGU changing and morphing and transforming and supporting graduate education as we move into these times. And the question is like there's a little bit of uncertainty on how things are going to go. But on the other side, I feel like I'm not sure. Is it uncertainty? Like, are we uncertain of how it's going to be, or is just fear and not wanting to recognize what is happening? Bob, what do you think about that?
I'd like to hear Itamar on that also, but I'll give my opinion, Itamar, and then you're more on the front lines of this. I guess when I first read last year when Itamar and I were doing AI for Humanity together, I read a couple of these scenarios and was very persuaded before, and Itamar got me a few more to read, Suleiman's book and a few others. So we read a lot of stuff that made us think that something is big coming up here. And the positives and negatives will depend on, it's not just going to be exogenous, it'll depend on us. So at a university, as you said, we could have cheating clinics, we could have people getting away from work, or we could have powerful tools for research and teaching. And the same goes with the economy. It could be a source of inequality, upheaval, revolution, abuse of power, corruption, or let's hope, if we have proper thought about it. But as with all these big issues, and then I want to hear Itamar, I think we're daunted by them. It's very hard for us to take on very big issues. It's just overwhelming. And that's why, Gloria, something like a university-wide effort, where in our own humble ways, we could try to do stuff and experiment with things and share our results then we've got something that could be really good. I know that Itamar and Dave Sprott have a new center that they're developing on AI for humanity. Maybe Itamar, you could tell us about that and give your impressions of where the scenarios are going.
Itamar, please unmute yourself because it doesn't matter how much AI we have. Every
Yes.
webinar will have that problem.
Yeah. So first of all, this is me. It's not my avatar. I'm working now with a company that they created a technology that they send a signal to your retina on a video call, and they check the response of the retina, 6 dimensions of the response, and they can figure out if it's a human being or a digital brain or avatar sitting in front of them. But my bottom line is that my focus now, I'm trying to develop new hobbies because they promised us that we will have more leisure time than working time. I don't think it will happen so fast because I remember the promise back in the 80s and 90s. They said, oh, we are going to have a paperless office. So now maybe the offices are a bit paperless, but less paper, more digital archives and documents, but it takes a lot of time. But here it's very fast. I just listened to many interviews that were 2 weeks ago in the World Economic Forums, and all the big companies and others, policymakers, and AI, of course, was at the center. So one of them said that in a year from now, you were talking about AGI, and we don't know how to define. No one knows how to define AGI, but it's probably a multitasking because now the AI systems they can perform like certain tasks, not all the tasks like us or more than us, as you said, Gloria. So they said that in a year from now, we will have an AI or AGI that will exceed the most smartest human on earth. But in 5 years from now, we will have an AI that will exceed all human collectively, all humanity capabilities collectively. And the amazing thing here is that you were talking, Bob, about Dario Adume from Anthropic, who created Claude. That Claude is the new software development workers, and so computer scientists created a technology that is going to replace them, and they will not have jobs. These researchers, professors, students, we see now, I think, the decline in software programming, and at CSAT, I'm from CSAT, the Center for Information Systems and Technology. We are going to spend our retreat next month, the faculty retreat, on the future of software development, because we don't know if we do the right thing right now for this era, because we have Claude or other systems that can do the job. But it's not only this. We are moving. Bob liked to call it co-intelligence. I like to call it augmented life. So we are moving into an era of augmented life where digital brains will work with human brains will work together. So we have already a cognitive partner. And my question is to Bob and maybe Heather, you are experts in public policy. So my question is not what should be the policy. My question is if public policy making, the process of can be adaptive, not at the speed of AI, because AI it's very fast, but close to the speed of AI, because as we move into augmented life era, we will have so many ethical, and this is what we are trying to do in the AI for Humanity Lab, by the way, to discuss and to explore ethical issues, new ethical situations that we didn't have before. And I can give examples, but let's now I will stop now. So I'm asking you, Bob, if you have any idea if the process of policy making can be more adaptive and faster.
I'd like Heather. Heather is our resident expert on policy processes. Heather, do you have any thoughts about that? You're muted though, right?
You're muted, Heather.
I do have some thoughts, so they're not very encouraging thoughts. So when I began my career as a policy analyst, my focus was on the area of regulation, and in particular public utility regulation, and in particular regulation of telephony. And a lesson of regulation, I would say, is that regulation is always behind. It is never where the technology is. It is always lagging the technology and striving to keep up. The extent to which that's true, of course, also depends on the political proclivities of the group who is doing or could be doing any regulation. So that clearly in the United States, we have periods where we have federal responses that are anti-regulatory and don't want to regulate, and periods of time when we have more pro-regulatory situations. And that's not always Republicans and Democrats, just by the way. It's really important to keep in mind that the EPA was created during the Nixon administration. So now, having said that, I do think this is actually a fundamental lesson. That doesn't mean that we couldn't do better, nonetheless. First of all, I think that they are doing better in Europe than we are right now in Europe and I think some of the Scandinavian countries as well. But of course, it's very hard to regulate for something that you don't really understand it, which I would say is a fundamental issue here. But I guess the thing that's perhaps also interesting to think about this is, and I think this is where Bob would come in, because I really haven't spent much time thinking about this, but I think he really has, is okay, so we've got this kind of principle that regulation always lags. We're always trying to catch up and keep up. But could we somehow use the AI to catch up better? And closer, maybe. Though again, you've still got to have political will. So I do want to point that out. But anyway, I think maybe Bob can talk more about that part.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I don't know the answer to that. We have to dive in. I'm having fun right now with two governments. One is in Peru and one is in Indonesia. Indonesia has a president that came in about a year and a half ago. And he's already set up at the core of his government the idea that AI is going to be something that could enhance democratic participation, could speed up regulation, permits, could control corruption in procurement, could do a lot of things at the same time that it could be a menace. So he's named with a very interesting process, 82 future leaders of Indonesia who are mostly tech people, but from government, business, and civil society. And he's empowering them to take on these questions. And now this coming year, they're going to have 2,000 such future leaders. Sent them for a couple of weeks to Cambridge, a couple of weeks to MIT, had a few people like me come over and work with them a little bit. So it's exciting to see them taking charge of this. Indonesia, fourth most populous country in the world, tremendously poor, great opportunities to improve human welfare. And so I won't go on to the Peruvian one, but it's interesting to see governments trying to take this on creatively. I don't know of anybody who's keeping track of this. The OECD has a program which is trying to get best practices now in using AI in government, or at least if not best practices, things that are going on and working. That's a great idea. So and they'll put that up there for all of us to learn from. I was at a research conference in December where people from around the world brought a lot of examples for the UN Office of Drugs and Crime of AI tools, chatbots, all sorts of things to help get anti-corruption efforts on the ground to be more effective. So it's bubbling up. I haven't seen, Heather, maybe we can find something together. I haven't seen any theorists on regulation working yet about this. I don't know if people are working, but clearly this is an area that's it's so important. There's so much money that's going to be there. That's another point. This is an area with oodles of resources. We haven't tapped them yet very effectively. Some universities have, but a year from now, there's going to be a lot more resources, and those guys feel guilty. So let's help them, Itamar, get AI for Humanity going, and see if they can fund you more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just and in relation to that, I was wondering, I just put it there. Should we just use the work that the UN has been doing with the Sustainable Development Goals to maybe guide the way that we think about the specific problems that we should be looking into in terms of policy development? Or is this something? Because the other thing that I'm thinking in terms of governance and policy that I would like to hear both Heather and Bob about to talk about is if AI becomes this Gen AI or AGI, how much the concept of state, like how is that related to the globalization of policies or the globalization of understanding of how we should be doing government? I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but
Well,
I
those
feel
are
like that AGI will create this huge global impact. And how can we just do this state by state?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the idea of having a global agency to do this is out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the arms race aspect of China versus US, plus not to mention Europe, makes that impossible to distrust there. Also, I don't know what they'd regulate. As Itamar said at the World Economic Forum, four of the big CEOs of the companies, where three of them said, we'd love to slow it down if the other guys would and figured out how to get the guardrails up there. But of course,
Yeah.
if everybody else is doing it and you get there first, there's going to be a big bonanza. I do have an insight into the question, though, of how to take this, not the global aspect, but how to take the policy side. And that is one of the things that enables policies to work are government institutions that work and also markets that work. And if you ask the question, if I told you there's going to be super abundant intelligence and information, what would that do to large companies or organizations? We'd go back to economic theory and look at Coase's theory of the firm, which argued the boundary. He wondered about how come in free markets we have all these non-market institutions in the middle of them don't behave like markets, these big companies. And he argued there's economies, there's transactions costs and economies of scale and scope, which explains why we have big organizations. Now we fast forward and say, wait a second, what if that constraint is radically relaxed? What could happen then to firms? And I can imagine, and I think we're going to work through this in our course, I can imagine scenarios where big firms will no longer be efficient. Now, let me take a second one. This is even more amazing. Again, back in the history of economic theory and economics applied to public policy, there was a whole debate about socialist economies and whether planned economies could replicate the conditions of the competitive equilibrium. And there were famous theorems written in the 1930s, Lang and Lerner, that showed if they had perfect information, they could. Well, we know from the history of planned economies, they have failed notably for two reasons. One is poor information and planning. The other is dictators tend to promote monopoly plus discretion minus accountability equals corruption. That's not good. But I think we could have a situation 5 years from now where we'll have such abundant information plus lots of wealth that we could see efficient communist style countries or cities or efficient socialist planning. So I think both sides of the old debates on the theory of the firm and the ineffectiveness of central planning may be vastly upset by abundance plus intelligence plus information. Those are just speculations right now and things I'm putting out there with some colleagues and seeing what they think and just playing in our class. We'll get to that in our class and see where we come up with at the end of the semester. Heather.
So I want to say a couple of things. I mean, one is directly in response to what Gloria said about the concept of the state. It's important to keep in mind that the extent to which we regulate or don't regulate, how we respond, how we integrate within our societies is due to actual like humans and politics. This has actually been a failing of the public policy discipline as a field, is that we have a tendency to want to rush towards like what's efficient or effective, and we don't really think about what the humans are going to do. So it's important to keep in mind that the humans are in this, right? And so one of the reasons that we might have the concept of the state remain is because we have different politics in different states, and they will have different approaches to all this. It's also true, of course, that your basic question that this is going to have a huge global impact, how can we regulate it state by state? This is actually a big recurring question in the public policy literature that appears under the terms either the common pool resources or the tragedy of the commons. And of course, this is fundamentally no different than the question of how we can have global climate change state by state, right? Fundamentally, it's the same question. It's a different implementation of that question, but it's the same governance and policy issues. And we have some insights into how to do it, but getting people to do it is a whole nother question. Again, it's the humans, right? And so this brings me to yet another thing, which is really negative. And I kind of hate to be like the negative one, but I have to say that we've been acting through this whole conversation as if the humans who are going to use the AI are well-intentioned. But it's important to keep in mind that some of the humans are ill-intentioned. And some of this is going to be used for bad, like they're going to intentionally use it for ill, not just accidentally, right? There's that. We don't know what we're doing. And so in some ways, we'll probably use it for ill in accidental ways, but there will be people who will purposely use it for bad. The use for espionage, for surveillance is enormous. Um, Bob says we're going to have abundant information, and that is absolutely true. But one of the problems is that a lot of that abundant information is not going to be real. And so we're going to have a terrible problem as humans in a world of abundant information of judging between the fake information that's created sometimes by people with actual bad intent to fool and confuse us from the vast amounts of fantastic, marvelous, wonderful information that will also be out there.
I think that we're already there. I think that we already are in abundant information. Like we thought that the internet was going to solve everything because it will create more access to all the information. And what exactly what you're saying is happening right now.
Yes.
So it's just going to be growing exponentially with AI.
Well, and the fact that we're able to make fake information look so much more and more and more real.
Yeah.
Right? So that clues that we've had, not that everybody's had them, but that, let's say, sophisticated users of information have had certain kinds of cues and clues that have helped them stay away from the fake information and stick more with the real information. But that's going to become harder and harder and harder because of the vast capacity to make this stuff look real and beautiful and desirable and so on.
Gloria mentioned the Turing test. Yesterday, a company that produces videos passed a Turing test with videos that people like experts could not tell the difference between these fake videos and real, in other words, real people. So Itamar says he's not an avatar right now, but it's really hard to tell. Don't you think, Heather? I'm looking at him now. It's pretty hard to say.
Yeah, well, and we have that real problem right now with that person has that senior person has been kidnapped in Tucson, who's the mother of Today Show.
Savannah Guthrie's mother.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems is that evidence of that the person is okay and alive can be produced artificially.
And lots of bad actors showed up, fake people who claimed they had her too. So
Yes.
as Heather said,
Yes.
there's one thing that's the lack of alignment of the AI, and there's another thing which is bad actors who can use the AI to do very bad things. And Bobby worked last year in the course that Itamar and I taught on AI for Humanity. One of the topics that we had that co-intelligence book included was cybersecurity. And Bobby, your team continued to work on that. And I think the most terrifying of the team presentations to me was that. I mean, the arms race between the the people who are protecting us against cybersecurity and the people who might want to harm us, be they foreign enemies, terrorists, criminals, whoever, that rivalry, Bobby, maybe you could comment on what you learned from doing that study.
Well, I hope that you're not referring to Darren Kimura's team and work.
I thought you were on that team. I'm sorry, Bobby, you weren't.
Yeah, I was on a different team, but I was very taken by Darren's presentation, and because I had studied, national security topics before, and cybersecurity was part of that. So
right.
Darren's presentation was sobering.
Yeah, it was shocking. So as Heather says, these are things that we'd like to have an international treaty. Sure, we would, but do we trust Putin or for that matter, Trump, to come up with an honest answer there.
And
And
I'd like to point out just briefly that so we've been talking about big things and they're really, really important, but it's important to talk about little things too. There have already been cases where the cases that I know about, young teenage boys have used AI to make sexually explicit pictures of young teenage girls at their school and then have shared them. Now, some might argue that this isn't particularly harmful, but having been a young teenage girl, I can assure you that this is really harmful to the young teenage girls. And so even that kind of simple thing. I mean, so again, it's really important that in our visions of a future, utopian or otherwise, that we keep in mind that the humans are still in the equation. And some humans are bad. Not most, thank God, but some.
yeah,
One question about this is also, for me, is we are talking about humans being in control of AI. But when you look at Moltbook, when you look at some of the things that are happening with agentic AI and allowing for the coordination of agentic AI, even before we get to Gen AI, which is something that we have not yet encountered, we are seeing a coordinated impact, things, structures that they are creating as agents. And given there's influence from people in the system, it's not people less, but it's certainly not directed by a person with their intent, be it good or evil. And I think that one of the things we might be missing in this conversation so far is what are the unimaginable effects of AI intelligence instead of us using AI using us?
wow, Ali, good question. It's a great question to start ending up and wrapping up. Bob, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think Ali is exactly right that there are two big developments in the beginning of this year. One was the emergence of AI implementing revolutions in AI, as Ingemar said. And the other is this open Claude, variously named, where networks of these folks, over 1.5 million of these agents, are out talking to each other, creating religions, having jokes. Somebody said it looks like Reddit on steroids. It's sort of not very, no one's written a symphony yet, but who knows what could come up as these things get smarter. And so, Ali, the people who are speculating about this that I've heard are people like Elon Musk. You get him an interview, and I mean, and some of these guys at the head of the companies, they'll sit down and they'll say, we're going to be working for them, or unless what? So I think the summary of all this from my perspective is all these things mean that we have to take the AI revolution more seriously than I have in the past. What I mean is that we have to sit down and think about this. What does it mean for our university in terms of enabling students to do research and learn and demonstrate their co-intelligence capabilities through what they do? Because that's what the marketplace is going to demand, I believe. That's us. And we have particular advantages with transdisciplinarity. We have some things we can do. And then for public policy people like me, or business people, or education people, or public health people, or CSAT people, we have to think apart from the technical side of this to make our lives more fun to do research. What are the policy implications of this? And they cut across a vast array of things. And so this is why this course is very humble as a way to try to get started on this. I think the syllabus is in your chat there if you'd like to have a look at it. And I'd be delighted to be in touch with any of you who want to keep it up, because I am the last person who knows the answers to these questions.
Hey, Gloria, Deborah Claypool had her hand up for quite a while.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was going to go with her. Deborah.
Thank you.
Deborah.
Hello, you guys. This is fascinating, and I'm really inspired by hearing what everybody's talking about. I would like to address Heather's point, which I think is a very good one, with sharing some of my observations of the younger generation of people who have an awareness that people are evolving along with the AI, the younger people who have grown up with it and are like evolving as it's evolving. And what I see is this recognition that they know that things can be faked. They know that things aren't real. Like sometimes they're always pointing it out to me, and that about things being faked. And I was thinking that one of the things that could happen as a side effect of this whole revolution is that there'll be an increased appreciation for human interaction and contact. And I think that might be where we go with the university, is that like that component of human discussion will become more valued because it is relatively scarcer.
Yeah. Thank you, Deborah. I love that point. And I was trying to make the point also in the chat when at some point, Heather, you were talking about intent and humans doing things, and why I think it's so important that the humanities and the arts are at the center of this, because they are the scholars that actually think about that connection and that collaboration and that human meaning. And however, is the opposite. The people that are managing these conversations are, the tech bros and people that actually don't believe, or at least are not thinking about humanity that much. They are feeling it, right? Like they were saying, "Oh, I felt sad when I realized that I will never code again," right? Like they felt that their creativity was taken away from them. But we need to figure out a way of putting the humanity and the arts at the center, because they are, I think, probably the lighthouse that are going to allow us to move in the right direction. And the other thing that I think that we need to put in the center, from my perspective, is social justice. Um, there's a lot of people talking about abundance. Like when I listen to, for example, there's a podcast that I have to listen to, but it makes me sick. Is Moonshot, where they invite a lot of these tech bros. And there's this guy, it's just the host is always talking about abundance. Like abundance is what is going to solve all the problems. And I'm like, we actually are in an age of abundance in comparison to previous centuries. And we are managed by power and people that are power thirsty. And a lot of things that are happening are because their structure of power. Like yesterday, I was having a conversation. I was talking like, what do you think that the Epstein files are about? They're about power and enacting power. These people are powerful people that had everything that they wanted, and still they needed to enact power over women and young boys and young men. Like it's all about power. So social justice is actually something that we need to put on the center as well, along with arts and humanities. And policy is what allow us to use that to create like a path for us to make it real. We have 1 minute. Bob, I'm going to give you the floor for the last
Well,
minute.
it's just great to have this conversation. Isn't it fun to hear everybody's perspectives? We didn't get to hear everybody's, but it's fun to think about. I'll just close by saying that it's the objectives of all this. I mentioned three that tend to be overlooked in the economic tech stuff that we put front and center in my course, which is the environment, the equality, equity, social justice piece, and the flourishing human beings, that is the well-being of real people. Those are objectives that we have to put front and center. We try to look at real examples, and we try to show how policy analysis itself could help people put those front and center so that we don't just go careening off in the pursuit of GDP.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody. Please follow up with us. Tell people about this webinar. It's going to be uploaded in our YouTube channel, like within a day. So anybody who says, "Oh, I wish I was there," they can be there asynchronously, as we are usually are now. So share, and also if you are faculty or scholars who are doing things like this, who are thinking about these things, reach out. Let us know at Cafe. Send us an email at cafe@cgu.edu. We are trying to put together resources and getting people as a critical mass starting to think about this in our community. So please reach out. Thank you again.
Okay. Take care, everyone.